everyone. My name is Nancy Ewurum, and I'm a communications consultant with Pangea Global Ventures. So we'll start with you, Ikenna. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you do at Releaf?
Sure, and thank you for having me today. My name is Ikenna Nzewi, as you mentioned. I'm a Nigerian American. I grew up in the United States, attended Yale University where I studied computer science, and fell in love with agriculture through the latter end of my college career. As a mentor of mine, did a lot of transformative work in agricultural policy. So my company now, Releaf, we're a technology firm, and we create tech that basically makes supply chains more efficient for fast-moving consumer good companies. So more and more African consumer good companies are going to have to rely on local supply chains to get the raw materials that they need for products. And our company helps place assets in the most strategic locations to make food cheaper for consumers.
Thank you so much, Ikenna. And over to you, John. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, your background, and the work you do at Pangea?
My name is John Chicatano, and I'm the founder of Pangea Global Ventures, where we are aiming to accelerate access to finance for agribusiness in West Africa. We're currently working in Ghana, in Sierra Leone, and in Senegal, and have done a little bit of work in Nigeria. My background is engineering also. I'm a civil engineer and initially worked in the engineering and environmental consulting space in the United States before coming to Burkina Faso shortly after there. And I spent 7 years in Burkina Faso and another 8 or 9 years in other parts of Africa, mostly West Africa, a lot of it Francophone Africa, working largely in the public sector in international development, in agriculture, in water and sanitation. But over time was increasingly noting the opportunity to support private sector engagement, particularly in the food and agriculture space. And that's why I formed Pangea Global Ventures a couple of years ago, seeing this exciting opportunity to support agribusiness and also to connect agribusiness to the really growing and exciting space of global impact investment.
Okay, thank you so much, John. And back to you, Ikenna. You did mention that you fell in love with agriculture towards the end of your studies as a computer scientist. I'd like to know what motivated you, like what drove you towards agriculture towards the later end of your studies in school.
Sure. Well, my mentor was the Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria. He now is the president of Africa's Development Bank, Akeomi Adesina. And I was lucky enough to learn from him and see how his career was really able to make a tangible impact on people in Africa. And so as I looked for a career path onto the continent, agriculture just continued to pop up as the industry that had the greatest potential to alleviate poverty and also shift a society onto a path towards prosperity and industrialization. And so bringing in my skills in computer science, which definitely required some retrofitting from thinking about, just, big data in a theoretical box to thinking about post-harvest loss on a farm. I've been able to bring that style of thinking and problem solving to an industry that has a lot of potential, but requires a lot of work to get it done.
Okay. Oh, wow, that sounds interesting. Thank you so much, Ikenna. And how about you, John? You mentioned you worked in different parts of Africa for a number of years. You worked in international development. You worked in water and sanitation. What inspired you to build an agricultural impact investment firm that connects agricultural entrepreneurs to finance? What inspired you and what motivated you?
I'll go back to Burkina Faso in the mid-90s when I was first working in the water and sanitation space and largely working with pumps and wells with artisans and as well as with farmers, with gardeners and those who are doing small scale agriculture, generally irrigating small plots of land. And I saw this really important opportunity and a need among these gardeners, those who are using watering cans in the beginning, and some were starting to use hand pumps, and those who advanced were using motorized pumps. But generally, they were producing good quality food with high demand. They understood what they needed, but part of what they needed was capital. So they would largely grow just by organically, by selling their produce and reinvesting in their farm. but I noted that these were really sharp entrepreneurs. Even though they were smallholder farmers in Burkina Faso, there was an opportunity for them to produce more food, to feed their families, to support their communities, but they needed investment, whether it was in pumps or in inputs for their farm. And over the years, the subsequent years, in working in other countries, I saw similar opportunities with entrepreneurs who were doing great work in food and agriculture, but needed growth capital. And that access to capital was a big challenge for a lot of these small entrepreneurs. And so many years later, now just a few years ago, and in 2019, we started Pangea Global Ventures to meet that need and to support agribusinesses, particularly in West Africa, which is the region that I know well, and my co-founder, Ni Norte Loco, being a Ghanaian, knows quite well, to support those entrepreneurs and also to take advantage of, as I said earlier, this growing movement of global impact investing, impact investors that want to see not only profit, but also social impact from their investments.
Okay, thank you, John. So being based in West Africa, I would like to know how you came across Releaf and why you chose them. Like, what piqued your interest in Releaf? Why did you go? Why did you focus your attention on this growing company at that time?
So Ikenna, you may remember I met Releaf and I met Ikenna through an introduction from Pardon Makumbe. So Pardon is a impact investor himself, mostly in the tech space, and we were talking about the kind of work he does, and he said, well, I'm not directly doing agriculture, but I know some folks who are, and he introduced me to Ikenna. That was back in 2020, and we connected via LinkedIn, which is always, for me, a great place to connect to folks. And a few days later, I think we were involved in a conversation. So that's how it started, is our network and introducing an introduction from a like-minded person in the network. Pardon is from, I believe, Southern Africa, Zambia or Zimbabwe, if I'm not mistaken. But these are connections that are always great to make. And so staying connected to folks and making sure that we are scanning for opportunities all the time, that's how we first met. But I remember Ikenna's leadership from the beginning, and that's what we always look for is leadership capability and understanding a problem and proposing a solution. So Ikenna really had that very clear in his mind. He had good documentation to describe what Releaf was doing, and we thought, well, this is a great opportunity to support an exciting and growing agribusiness in Nigeria.
Over to you, Ikenna. When John was introduced to you, when Pangea first came into the picture, what would you say convinced you to work with them?
Well, I think John is being a little too kind to us. He definitely helped us get structured and set our ship on the right path. I had just gotten back to Nigeria from the United States, and we were basically trying to invent a piece of technology for the sustainable oil palm sector. And we had made a lot of progress on that product. Things were going well. It seemed like we were going to go out and raise a round of financing in March of 2020. And if you can remember what happened in March of 2020, markets crashed, COVID lockdown started, and that round was basically dead on arrival. Investors basically told us that they were not going to be investing until they saw things settle out. And so for a business like ours that was more focused on raising venture capital and growing very quickly, we now needed to find a way to stay alive and to continue to do our hardware research and development. And so opportunities in non-dilutive capital were really the only other option that our company had to keep the lights on, as well as, like things like me loaning the business money and not taking a salary. But there was this opportunity that we identified to work on a grant that was centered around creating jobs for the youth, which is something that I'm very passionate about, and really what brought me back to Nigeria is helping to take this country along its path to industrialization.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So I think you kind of answered part of my next question. I was going to ask you, why you felt Pangea was the right partner at that time. So I think you've kind of covered that. So I'll just move on to the next question, which is tell us a little bit about your working relationship with Pangea. Just walk us through how Pangea supported you in acquiring funds for your startup.
Definitely. So we did have other options that we could have approached or worked with our non-dilutive strategy, but I really valued the opportunity to work with John, and he was, as a founder and someone that's building his own business, I really appreciated how much empathy and care he devoted to helping Releaf succeed. And to get us kind of up to a level of standard where we could really put together a cogent grant application. And so when we looked at other folks that helped out in the grant advisory space, there were big businesses. It was book a 30-minute meeting with this person. These are our fees. Not really that personal care that's, I think, required to help a business submit its first grant. And a first grant that can actually win a grant of sizable capital. But we saw from Pangea that there was a willingness to take a long-term bet on Releaf and an investment in helping us succeed. And so that's why we worked with Pangea. But we applied for CFYE, which is the Challenge Fund for Youth Employment. It's offered by the Netherlands, and it's a grant that's really focused on creating jobs for the youth and women. And so our technology that we were developing, that Kraken, that nutcracker, created a great opportunity to localize food processing to farming clusters. So very often crops are produced, they're then loaded onto trucks in their raw form, and experience a high degree of post-harvest loss between the farm gate and the factory gate that's maybe in a big city like Lagos or Cairo or Cape Town, right? These big coastal cities where people in the past would import a lot of raw materials, process them using a lot of expat talent, and then supply these products to consumers, right? And so there was an opportunity for us to create a catalytic change and kind of shift labor and working opportunities into the areas where the food actually came from. And John really helped us put that together in a way that a donor could understand and get excited about. And I think that contributed to us being able to secure the grant.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ikenna. I heard a lot of care, empathy, and kindness on the part of John, and I think that's something to look out for in an investor. It doesn't come easily these days, but I appreciate that about John. And okay, so over to the next question. You talked about the Challenge Fund for Youth Employment grant. How would you say that that grant prepared your company to raise funds in your most recent?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said earlier. I think John has given us too much credit. He really helped us structure and distill what we were doing on the ground into a format in which various stakeholders could engage with it, whether it was a donor, whether it was a VC equity investor, et cetera, et cetera. And so I almost felt that we were being consulted as we were also being consulted on our own business as we were also preparing for this grant application. But I think one really positive sign to investors as we went out to raise our $2.7 million seed round was that our business was able to bring in non-dilutive capital, right? And so an investor that would put $1 into Releaf could expect 50 cents of non-dilutive capital from a donor, essentially. And that effectively creates a higher return on equity for an investor, right? And so less money needs to come into the company for that company to create the same size of return. So there's more to be shared for the folks that created that value. And so it was a very key aspect of us raising our seed round was saying, hey, we are not only just creating a technology that can grow very quickly and increase profitability, but the externalities that it creates in the communities where the technology is located can also attract donor funding to help subsidize the cost of this technology.
Okay.
I have to jump in here and say the credit really goes to the entrepreneur, and Ikenna and his team at Releaf. They are the ones that are doing this work. We are advisors, we're helping hands, we're facilitators, but we're not creating these companies that are producing and processing food. And so whether it's Ikenna at Releaf or the other entrepreneurs we work with, Marion at Mariseth, Felix at Mayflix, Reg at White Pole, Valerie at Estival. These are the entrepreneurs that are doing the work in creating enterprises, creating jobs. And so I think it's important that we play our proper role as facilitators and supporters, and really highlight the work that the enterprises are doing. So we typically really try to put the spotlight as much as we can on the enterprises, and we think that's really where the excitement is happening.
All right, thank you, John. Piggybacking on your last statement, what type of entrepreneurs do you work with? What kind of companies do you seek out? Do they have to be in a particular growth stage? And what kind of attributes do you look out for in agribusinesses or entrepreneurs before you dedicate resources to connect them to investors?
Well, first, we are a small, young business ourselves. And so when I kind of talked about our work together, that was really exciting for us, because Releaf was one of our first partners or clients. And fortunately, that work went extremely well, and I think it was a great partnership. And we're looking for more such partners now as we grow. And the first thing that we look for is leadership. So I know investors talk about this, and it's true that it all starts with a leader who has a vision and who's able to execute on that vision. And so on one hand, we find people who are able to execute but might not have such a vision. And on the other hand, we have people with ideas but unable to execute, and both are really important. And we found that in Ikenna clearly, as he's shown with his excellent success to date with his team. And so we are always seeking that kind of leadership. It's hard to really quantify that or even describe it, but fortunately, we've been fortunate to find, and we think there are a lot of such leaders that are really undiscovered and putting their heads down and doing their work of running their businesses day to day. And one of the things that we are very proud of is to be able to use our network and find such leaders. And again, the credit goes to them, but we when we find them, we get really excited about working with them. Other things are important in the agriculture space. Traction is really important. We do find some companies that come up with ideas, but ideas really aren't enough in the agriculture space. You've got to show that you can implement them, because managing an agricultural operation is pretty complex. And so, it's really important that entrepreneurs can show that they have some ability to manage the farm operation or the processing operation or the food systems operation. And so traction, usually we look for 3 years of some level of traction, although we're willing to consider younger enterprises, but having some proven success in doing what they do. Size does come into play, mostly because, unfortunately, for now, most investors are looking for $1 million deals or greater. But we are increasingly looking at smaller businesses, because we think we can find investors who are in this missing middle space of doing smaller investments. In terms of the kinds of agribusiness, we're basically focused on the agriculture sector. We have looked at some other things in the energy sector, but really we're focused on agriculture and agribusiness, and we're fairly agnostic within that. We're looking at all kinds of value chains, all kinds of food systems. We do like certain value chains that we tend to have more expertise in, and palm oil is one of them. We're very excited about palm oil because in West Africa, as Ikenna and I have discussed many times, it's really, West Africa used to be a huge source of palm oil for the world, and that influence has shrunk over the years, but there's an opportunity to produce sustainable palm oil for the growing demand for palm oil globally. But there's a lot of other value chains that we're doing in the horticulture sector, fruits and vegetables, anything related to animal feed, poultry, fish feed. We tend to shy away from the pure tech space. We see a lot of interest in agri-tech, but that's really not our expertise. And so we're really focused on those who are producing, processing, exporting, and moving food throughout the region, throughout the country, and throughout the region. So that's our tendency. But again, we're willing to look at any agribusiness that we see as a growing opportunity.
Okay, so I'm going back to you now, Ikenna. One of the things that John mentioned is that he looks out for in entrepreneurs is leadership. and those who are able to execute the ideas you thought about. I would like to know, what values do you embody at Relief, and how have these values impacted the work you
Yeah,
do at
definitely.
Relief?
So at Releaf, we have what we call virtues instead of values. So we believe that values are things that you believe, and virtues are things that you do. And in many ways, we believe that like what we are as a company is the sum of our actions. And so we've put together virtues that basically lay out the behaviors that we think are required to be successful as a company. I've been like very heavily influenced by the writing of Ray Dalio. And so his seminal book, Principles, is one of my favorite books. I've read it twice now, despite its length, as some of my friends will say. But I think it's a really good book, and lays out that, especially as a leader, it's not your job to be omniscient and to tell everybody what to do, but to really be able to build a system where the strongest members of your team in a specific area are given the ability to do their best work to help your organization succeed overall. And I think that is like a consistent process that we have to continue to hone at Relief. And I'll say that, you know, a difficulty with our culture is that it does take people time to acclimate to it, you know. And so if you've been in a work environment where it's really important to get face time with your boss and things like that, Relief is not an organization that is oriented towards that sort of behavior. We're more oriented towards empowering people who have the most expertise to do the work. And if we do the work, we believe that we will be the company that we envision ourselves as.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I would like to know, I read a little bit about Relief. Back when you started with your brothers, your cousins, just basically family members. Can you share a little bit about working with them, that journey, and how you have grown over the years? And also, as part of your response, I would also like to hear about what is next for Relief.
Yeah, definitely. So origin story time. Yeah, Relief was started with my brothers and cousins. So we were all Nigerian Americans who grew up in the States and had never been opportune to go back home to Nigeria. And so we started Relief out of this desire to reconnect and almost hold ourselves accountable for contributing to the development of our home. And so, as you can imagine, when you bring 6 brothers and cousins into a room, there isn't like a very clear leader. And so that style of this person knows the most about this, they should do that, was born out of that culture of us just trying to find our way to make something valuable and contribute something. And so since that time, members of my family have moved on to other things. I think amongst us, there are 4 venture-backed companies that have been started. We've raised over like $20 million in financing, and created like over 250 jobs. And so I think Relief in that nonprofit form was almost a sandbox for us to develop like our individual like leadership capabilities, and then also to find exactly the career path that we would want to follow and the things that we would want to do. And for some members of the family, that was doing really incredible high-tech things like natural language processing and speech to transcription technology. For other people, it was creating a marketplace for phones. Other folks are working on Web3 security, and at Relief, we're cracking nuts. So maybe the least significant, but we think it's pretty cool too. But I think that founding environment has really influenced where the company has gone. As far as like what Relief wants to do going forward in the future, it's really our goal to be an industry cartographer, if you will, for us to understand the landscape of where Africa should be placing its food processing assets and technology to create the most efficient supply chain. And so while in other markets you've had agriculture take a much more centralized format, really big factories, and then farmers on one end, it's very clear that in Africa we need an intermediary between these smallholder farmers that have very small farms, and then these very poor roads and infrastructure in between those farms and those big factories in the cities. And so it's our job to basically figure out the best technology for the African context, develop that technology, and then also build geospatial technology to understand the best location to put that stuff. And so over the coming years, you'll see us expand into new crops. We've signed some letters of intent to move into our second crop, which will be cassava. And we've also begun to look at some international expansion. So, John, your experience in the francophone side of things will hopefully serve us well in the future to come.
That's great to hear. Music to my ears. And as you know, I always like to talk about the connectedness between African economies. And it's a shame that there's not more trade happening. We know the context is rapidly evolving, but it would be great to see more trade catalyzed by Releaf in this sector and work with companies like yours that are promoting that. But one more thing in reaction to that, it's always great to hear Ikenna's vision. And interestingly, having played in the sandbox of those working on language recognition and internet security, he chose to crack nuts, and I think that says a lot. And it really was part of why we were really attracted to the work that you're doing in the first place. So, I mean, it starts with cracking nuts. It starts with what's happening with, unfortunately, many times children cracking these palm nuts to extract the kernel. But he saw an opportunity there to bring that into efficient work that, takes it out of the hands of children and puts it into a process that benefits smallholder farmers, and moving to efficient supply chains and moving smallholder production to markets. And I always like to refer to a paper that's written actually by Bain, where Ikenna coincidentally did work earlier in his career, called Farmer Allied Intermediaries. And that's what this paper is all about, is making value chain more efficient and moving goods from smallholders to the markets. And Ikenna is really a pioneer in this space. So it's awesome to see that work that he's done as a pioneer in supporting smallholder farmers, but building a sustainable enterprise that brings profit to all the actors in the value chain.
Appreciate that, John.
Yeah. Thank you, John. I think it's also quite impressive that you're looking at other food crops, and cassava is quite big in West Africa, and there are lots of smallholder farmers, who are into the harvest of cassava. So that's really, I think, is a good step in the right direction. So kudos to you, Ikenna. Okay, John, we are getting towards the end of our interview. I'd like to know, John, what are you most proud of about Pangea? And Ikenna, get ready to answer the same question.
Okay.
About Releaf.
Sure.
I'm proud of our team as pioneers. We feel like we're pioneers in this exciting space. There's momentum building, and we are pushing forward, and hopefully pushing forward with others at our side, other agro enterprises like Releaf. I'm proud of our team. All of us as teammates are pioneers. Awa, Ajara, Mercy, you, Nancy, Epitas, and others that are really building. That's the thing that I think is very important, is building relationships. We're doing business, but business starts with relationships. And too many times we ignore that part. And it's really important to build relationships with agribusiness, to understand the vision that the founders have. And at the same time, building relationship with investors. Investors are sometimes struggling with this relationship building because they're so far away. But our team is really able to build those relationships, like I said earlier, through our networks and through just direct face-to-face meetings, going out to the farms and visiting folks, but building relationships that show that we believe in what they're doing, and then doing the hard work that it takes to support agribusiness growth.
So on my end, I'm most excited about the employment numbers that we've been able to drive. We have a team of 160 people, and I honestly did not expect to be leading a company that has been able to build such a large team. And I think we're really able to contribute to that youth employment gap that is required for an economy to become successful. Second aspect is that we are inventing the technology for our use case in our environment, right? And so we have intellectual property in the deshell and the nut cracking technology that we've built. And then we're also building a proprietary geospatial tool to basically be able to understand the best places to put these pieces of technology. And I think that this is going to be an important aspect of Africa's turning point with agriculture, is that we're not just going to be able to import technology from another country and expect it all to work out like gravy. We're going to have to spend time understanding the local context in the market and building solutions that are form fit to the challenge that's there.
Yeah, spot on. I think one of the things I learned as an entrepreneur is you don't just import technology from wherever and just trying to implement it in a different market. You have to localize it. You have to find out what works in that place where you are implementing the technology. So yeah, kudos to you. And you can if you can do anything to improve the state of agribusinesses in West Africa, I mean, aside what you are doing at Releaf, what would that be?
Encourage more entrepreneurs to take a more abstracted view of technology. I think sometimes when we think of technology, it has to be crypto, it has to be artificial intelligence, but technology is really just a tool to make more value and efficiency for human beings. And so if in a local context, people are using rudimentary tools to crack open palm kernels, technology is actually developing a nutcracker. And I think when there is a greater appreciation for that fact, we'll see more Nigerian Americans and Africans from all over coming back home to build solutions with and in collaboration with people that are here and that can really make these businesses successful.
I'll chime into this question, and I'll say two things here. One is to accelerate the shift from aid to trade and investment. And the shift is happening, but we really need to accelerate it. We can see today, for example, World Food Program is appealing for $22 billion for food assistance. And sure, there's a need for food assistance, but we also need to end the need for food assistance by producing more food. And we can do that if we have more investment and trade in agribusiness. The second thing is bring more financing to the missing middle, the smaller agribusinesses that don't yet have $1 million of revenue, but may have a couple $100,000 of revenue and a huge potential to growth. Today, there's relatively little opportunity for them, whether it's with local lenders or international investors. And I think there's an increasing opportunity to generate funds. Maybe Pangea will build one of its own someday, but to create funds to serve this missing middle piece that will someday become the big agribusinesses of tomorrow, but they need to start with smaller ticket sizes.
I love that point, John. And I think the difference between aid and trade and investment is that you have to expose yourself to a little bit more risk, right? Aid can be very, okay, we're going to send the bags of food to XYZ locations. It's going to work perfectly. Trade and investment requires more of a risk appetite, but the return and the sustainability of that return is what can actually create prosperity.
I think this is another conversation here because there's a lot of risk in aid too. And I've worked in this sector for quite a bit. And a lot of that food aid actually doesn't serve its intended purpose, which is largely saving lives. A lot of it is really not saving lives, and it's not even going to its intended beneficiaries. So I'm not saying it's not needed, it is, but we need to really think about the balance of resources. And, you know, that $22 billion that's being pushed out as food aid, can we do better with that? So maybe that's a conversation for the future.
For another day, yeah.
How do you think that the World Food Program can do better instead of just handing out aid that doesn't get to the beneficiaries? What do you think they can do better from their end? I know we have the people receiving the aid have a lot of work to do, but how about those giving it out? So you've mentioned that that's not a sustainable solution. What do you think can be done better by World Food Program, for instance?
This is a conversation for another day. I think it's a long one, but basically World Food Program does a great job of distributing food aid all around the world. So I'm not saying the World Food Program should do anything differently. What I'm suggesting is that the resources, which are limited, the limited resource that we have, we should consider shifting them so that there's more investment in agriculture, in producing food in places like Nigeria and Ghana. And we see perennial food assistance going particularly to places like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, even northern Nigeria. And we should be procuring more of that food. I know it's a desire of WFP and other aid organizations, but let's invest so that there are more producers who are producing things like orange flesh sweet potato and
right.
cassava and maize and other products that can serve the needs of of those children who are malnourished around the world. I think that's where we need to shift resources. But it's a tough question, but I hope that we think about how to shift those resources in order to benefit producers of food in Africa.
Okay, thank you so much, John, for sharing that. And lastly, Ikenna, if someone wants to learn more about you or your company, where could they find you?
You can find us at relief.africa.
Oh, Releaf.Africa, very simple. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We have come to the end of this interview.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to meet you, Nancy and John. Always good to catch up.
Thanks, Ikenna.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Always great to chat.
Thank you so much.
Definitely.